So let's jump into these 6 steps of success that we're talking about here. Step number 1, you have to decide what you want. Now that sounds so obvious.
It means the ability to determine exactly what it is that you want to be, have, or do in life. And the more I study successful men and women, the more I find that every single one of them, the top 5%, are very clear about where it is they're going and what it is they want to accomplish. And when I look at unsuccessful men and women, or men and women who seem to be unhappy and floundering, I find that almost invariably they have a very, very limited sense of direction, sometimes no sense of direction at all. As they say, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. If you do not have clear, specific goals for your life, you are doomed forever to work for people who do.
But I want you to have a big vision, a big vision. I want you to go for everything it is you want in life. And to get in touch with that from your heart. See, we were told, a lot of us, you can't have that, you can't do this. Forget all that. If none of that mattered and anything was possible, what would you want?
Every one of us has had an experience. At one time when we were small, we had a vision of being grown up and having our own cars. And as we grew older, we had a vision of having our own homes and our own families. The problem is that our goals are set so low that even when we do achieve them, they don't turn us on. They don't fill us with enthusiasm. So dream big dreams.
So one of the phrases I have is ask what, not how. Because many of you don't know how you're going to get it. And if you don't see how you can achieve it, then you're afraid to commit to it. Well, I can't see how to have a perfect relationship with my husband, so I don't want to commit to that because I don't want to be a failure. I can't see how I could ever get medical school given the income we have, so I don't want to commit to that. What I'm going to teach you here is if you'll make the commitment and do these other steps that we're going to talk about, the how will show up along the way. In my ideal community world, there's no hunger. There's no illiteracy. There are no gangs. People say, oh, that's impossible. Well, it's only possible if we start to visualize it, decide this is what we want. And once we commit to it, as I said, the how will show up. Now, don't let your mind tell you it's not possible. The second step to success that's so critical is you've got to set specific goals and objectives for your vision or your dream. It's a nice thing to say, I want a winter home in Hawaii. But that won't do it. It's got to be measurable. It's got to be in time and space. How much do you want and by when? Now let me give you a good example of this, why it's so important to make a list of goals. I tell people in my seminars, you want a goal or an objective, a measurable thing for every part of your vision, and I think you want to have 101 goals. I mean, really go for it. Now, John Goddard, who we wrote about in our first Chicken Soup for the Soul book, when he was 15, he set a list of 127 goals that he wanted to achieve. Now, he's sitting in his dining room with his dad, and all these people are coming over to dinner. These are the big, successful people in town. And he's listening to them talk to his dad, who's a successful businessman, saying things like, you know, I wish before I'd started my business, I'd traveled around the world, because now it's too late. And he said, I don't want to live my life and get to 50, 60 and go, I wish I had. And so he made a list of 127 goals. And he's achieved 115 of those 127 goals. So he wakes up every morning and he knows exactly what he's working toward. He's got a blueprint for his life. What about you? Do you have a blueprint for your life? And if not, why not? Let's look at this idea of specificity for a minute. Like a winter home in Hawaii. Very nice. But if I say, I will own a 2-bedroom beachfront villa on the west coast of Maui, Hawaii, by June 1st, 2003, does that sound a little more clear? Yeah. And until you get specific like that, the creative part of your brain won't jump in and decide how to help you get there. And that's why a lot of people never get their dreams, because they don't make them specific enough. You got to get real nitty-gritty. Break it down. Some people say, you know, I want our business to increase. Well, how much? By when? Want the reading scores to go up in a school. How much? By when? Until you have that, you're not going to make progress. And so many people's dreams never get completed because they're not clear about the specific number of how much by when. Now, finally, what's the purpose of all this? The purpose of all this is not to get the $1 million, the Rolls Royce, the best-selling book, all of that. That's nice. But have you ever known people that had all that and weren't really happy? And have you ever known people that had all that and then lost it? You know, Donald Trump was really wealthy for a while and then he lost it and now he's coming back and all that. Well, that happens. It's not the result that's important. It's who you become in the process of achieving the result. Jim Rohn said, set a goal so big that in the process of achieving it, you become someone worth being. Isn't that an interesting concept? Because it's not the result. If you set a big goal, 3 things are going to show up in your life. One is called considerations, all the thoughts about why it's not possible. all the fears that you have about going out there and doing that thing. And finally, there are real roadblocks out there in the world. There are laws and things that maybe that it's not legal to do that yet, or it's not zoned for that, or all those kind of things. And you're going to have to learn how to overcome those roadblocks, and to learn how to quiet the considerations in your head, and learn how to overcome those fears. But have you ever done something that was really scary, and then the next time you did it, it wasn't quite so scary, and then the third time was, and pretty soon it's no big deal. But you have to go through it, right? And when you're done, you get to have something in your life called mastery. And that's the goal. The goal is mastery. Mastering your fears, mastering your thoughts, mastering your behaviors, so that you can do anything you want. That can't be taken away from you. So what you want to do is create goals that are so big and so full of your heart that when you achieve them, even if you lose the result, the best-selling book, they always fall off the bestseller list. My publisher over here will tell you that. They just don't stay on there forever. But the reality is, you become a master in life. 3 is you've got to visualize the results that you want. This is probably the most important step. What does that mean? You've all heard people say, visualize the goal as if it's already achieved. Think about this. Have you ever known a kid, like a high school kid, he's into skateboarding or something, and you go into his room and the whole wall is covered with pictures of skateboarding? It's like he's surrounding himself with this image of what he wants. People say, I can see it so bad I can taste it. You ever heard that phrase? Yeah. Well, they literally can see it. And because they can see it, it creates something inside of them that moves them toward the goal. How many of you have ever thought, gee, I'd like to go to Hawaii, and then you're at a party about 3 days later, and across the room, a room full of 100 people, you hear someone say Hawaii. You ever had that experience? It's like the Red Sea parts, and you go walking. Did you say Hawaii? How do we do that? Well, the reticular system in our brain opens up and we perceive more. Now, I'm going to demonstrate this to you very graphically here in the studio and at home on TV. And I want you to pay attention over here, if we could, to the monitor. And we're going to bring up a sentence on this monitor. And I'd like you to read this sentence with me out loud on the count of 3. We'll all read it out loud. 1, 2, 3. Finished files are the result of years of scientific study combined with the experience of many years. Okay, then we'll take that off the monitor. And what I'd like, in a moment, we're going to put that back up. And when we put it back up, we're only going to leave it up for 10 seconds. And what I want you to do is count the number of times the letter F. F. How many times does F appear in that sentence? Okay? Now, first question. Were we all looking at the same sentence? Or not? See, there is an objective reality out there. Let's take a look again, and let's see. Those of you that saw three Fs, if we look up on the monitor, are those the 3 you saw? Yeah. Yes? Okay. Now we can bring that off. And those of you that saw more, let's bring it up again. Now, if you look, there are 6 Fs underlined in that sentence. You hear that? Oh. That's what we psychologists call the oh my gosh reaction, you know? Okay. Now, here's the deal. Just because you didn't see the extra Fs, does that mean they're not there? No, they're still there whether you see them or not. Do you think some people see more resources out in the world than you do? More solutions to problems? More entrepreneurial opportunities than maybe you do? More people that look friendly they could get a hug from? More money that's available for loan? See, everything's out there. All the solutions to your problems exist, but we don't see them. And partially we don't see them because we've never learned this concept of how to get our brain to open up and let this reticular system in the back let that information in. Did you ever drive down a street and notice a house and go, where'd that come from? And your husband or wife goes, honey, that's been there for 3 months. You know? And literally you just didn't see it. It was like a blind spot. But what happens when you learn this technique, all of a sudden you start seeing more. So the idea is that you can use this in any aspect of your life, whether it's sports, whether it's, losing weight, whether it's getting better grades in school, learning to read, whatever. Step number 4 is what? Take action. Take action. One of my favorite quotes is by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. He said, the heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they while their companions slept were toiling upward in the night. What does that mean? You got to work. You got to do some doing this. You can't just sit around and hope it'll happen. One of the steps, one of the actions you need to take is called asking. And many of us, see, we wrote a book, Mark and I wrote a book called Dare to Win. And it was a book of all these kind of things, and people went out and they read the book, and still a lot of people weren't successful. And we thought, what's the problem here? And as we began to analyze and interview people, we realized that one of the main things that was blocking most people was the fear of asking for what they wanted. They wouldn't go up and just say, can I borrow money? Will you support my dream? Will you volunteer for school? Will you lend me your car? Whatever it is they need, they were so afraid of being rejected. And so we wrote a book called The Aladdin Factor, How to Ask For and Get Everything You Want. And we were doing all that research, we ran across a girl named Marquita Andrews. And Marquita Andrews was the living example of what we call ask, 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 because you're going to have to ask a lot of people. And Marquita, her mother, when she was a little girl, came up to her and said, you know, Marquita, I have a dream. My dream is to travel around the world, but I also have a dream for you. I want you to graduate college. Problem is, I'm a waitress. I don't see how I can underwrite both dreams on a waitress's salary. But I'll make a deal with you. If you'll go to college and agree that after you graduate, you'll take 25% of your income for the first number of years and put that in savings to send me around the world, then I'll pay for your college education. But if you're not willing to do that, then I don't know if I want to pay for your college education. Well, what is she? She's like 7 or 9 at the time. She goes, sure, deal, you know. Well, later that year, she joins the Brownie Scouts. And the Brownies are part of the Girl Scouts, and they came out with their annual cookie drive. And they had a contest that year. Girl who sells most cookies wins trip for 2 around world. Marquita says, I'm getting out of this one easy, right? So she starts selling cookies like you can't believe. Now, in her first year as a Brownie Scout, she sold 3,526 boxes of Girl Scout cookies. How'd she do it? Ask, ask, ask. She lived in New York, high population concentration, right? She would go into high-rise apartment buildings and condos, and as people would come down in the morning and back from work, she would just be there. Did you buy your cookies yet? Did you buy your cookies yet? Well, you want to buy some cookies? And if she bought one, they say, well, you want to buy 2? Don't you know people? She would just ask, ask, ask. Then one day, she finds herself at 14 years old. She wrote a book called How to Sell More Cookies, Condos, Cadillacs, Computers, and Everything Else. She's in the Guinness Book of World Records. Before she retired, she sold over 32,000 boxes. Isn't that astounding? But what does she do? Ask, 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 ask. Very powerful tool. Now, she had one final clause, a little phrase she says, SW, 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 SW. What does that mean? Some will, some won't. So what? Someone's waiting. So if you ask enough people, eventually someone's going to say yes. If I asked everyone in this room, do you have a red car? Eventually someone would say yes. It doesn't matter. If you ask enough people, you're going to get your dream met. Now, I said before the break I'd teach you one word, how to deal with no when you get a no from somebody. And again, I'd like you to write this down, write it in your brain if you don't have anything to write it with on paper and so forth. And here's the word. It's very simple. When someone says no to you, what I want you to say to yourself real loud inside your head is the word next. Now, what does that mean? Ask somebody else. Absolutely. How many people live on the planet? 5 billion people. Someone wants to do what you want to do. Someone wants to get involved in your dreams. Someone wants to support you. You might have to ask a lot of people. Remember, ask, 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 ask. Now, what stops people from asking? What stops people from doing? It's something called fear. We're all afraid. We're afraid we're going to look stupid. We're afraid we're going to get rejected. I love this person who did the acronym FEAR. Stands for fantasized experiences appearing real, or false evidence appearing real. Because when you close your eyes and you fantasize something like you're not going to be able to pay your bills, or they're going to take your house, or you're going to flunk out of school, then your body reacts like it's real. Now let's look at this fear. The biggest fear I think that stops most people from asking is the fear of what? Rejection. So let's say that I ask, what's your name? I go over to Susan, I say, Susan, would you have dinner with me tonight? And let's say she says no. I go, oh. Everyone goes, oh, Jack's been rejected. It's so sad. But let's look at it objectively. Did I have anyone to eat dinner with before I asked her?
No.
Did I have anyone to eat dinner with after I asked her?
No.
Did my life really get worse?
No.
Stayed the same, right? We've got to get over this fear of rejection. Don't let it stop you. It's not a big deal. Just keep asking the questions. Ask, ask, ask. Say next. Move on. Nothing happens if you're rejected. Which leads us into step 5, which says respond to feedback. See, when you take a first action, is that necessarily going to be the right one? No. But you can't get feedback unless you take the action. And some of us are so afraid of doing the wrong thing, we wait until like 18 doves fly over our house in the sign of a cross. Oh, it must be the ideal auspicious day, and then we take action. Well, they don't fly over that way too often, right? So we just have to take an action and see what happens. Now, there's two kinds of feedback. What are they? Positive and negative. Which one do you like best?
Positive.
Right. Positive feels good, right? You know you're on track. But have you ever had negative feedback and it was valuable?
Yes.
Right. So there's two kinds. Now, how many of you actively solicit feedback in your life? You say, hey, I want feedback on how to be a better parent or a better teacher, or how can I be a better salesperson? How can we serve your company better? Right? Most people don't ask for feedback. Why don't they ask? They don't want to hear it. But let's say you're a teacher in school and you don't ask feedback. How I can be a better teacher. The kids go home. Do you think they're talking about how you can be a better teacher? Oh man, that teacher, she doesn't let us do this, and she's so mean, and yada yada. Well, everyone in town knows but you. Everyone's talking about it. You're the only one not in on the secret. If you're not getting along with your wife, she's called her girlfriend, her mother, her sister, told the people in the office, everything that's wrong with you. But guess who she hasn't told, perhaps? You. So it's very important to ask for feedback. Step number 6, the last step. Perseverance. Keep on keeping on. Never give up. Never give up. If you've got a goal that's important in your heart, don't give up. As I said earlier, we would have self-published our book if no one else would have published it. You got to have that kind of commitment to your goals. You may not know this, but the average millionaire in America goes bankrupt 3.5 times before they become a millionaire. Walt Disney went bankrupt 5 times. Henry Ford went bankrupt 3 times. See, it takes perseverance. So if you'll make your dreams a priority, and if you'll surround yourself with positive people, if you take 100% responsibility for your life and decide exactly what you want, and set specific goals and objectives, and visualize your goals as already completed, take massive and repeated action to respond to feedback, make corrections, on course, off course, and never give up, then I promise you, you'll start to live an amazing life full of dreams come true.